It is true. You're looking at grandpa material right now. Woo! And I will say that this kid has the setup in life, not because of the dad, but because of the grandpa. I'm just kidding. You are going to be a great daddy. I'm telling you, I'm so proud of you, son. Woo! Come on. Yeah. What a great, what a great start to church today. Man, so good. No band, no need for anything, just our voices and a little guitar. Amen? Yeah. Well, good morning to you. Who was here last week? Anybody in the house? Anybody? If you were here last week, you'll remember, I hope, two different things. Number one, that the army in England, pretending to be the firemen, killed the cat. That's number one. And number two, you will remember, hopefully, the formula for success in any area of life, and it goes something like this. Success equals doing the right thing over long periods of time, despite how you feel. Anybody remember that? We talked about this idea that we have to choose this kind of preferred ending, and when we look at the end, when we know where we want to go in life, we need to get on the right path, and the right path requires right things in our life. We have to aim for something in life, because if you aim at nothing, you get nothing, but actually you get worse than nothing. You know what you get when you aim at nothing? You get a whole lot of something that you never wanted in your life in the first place. That's what you get when you aim for nothing in your life. And so I asked you to do something, and because you love me as your pastor, I asked you to think about the end. I asked you to start to think about where do you want to go in life? Who do you want to become in life? What does God put inside of you? How do you want all these various areas of your life to end? And then I asked you to think about some of the right things in life that you have to begin doing in order to get where you actually want to go, in order to fulfill the God-given potential in you. Now, I won't even dare to ask, because I don't want to be so disappointed. I won't even dare to ask who actually did this. But the idea was, we didn't actually do anything. I just want you to think about, where do you want your life to go, and what are some of the right things that you have to start doing in your life to become who you want to become? Because most of us get stuck doing wrong things, hoping that right stuff is going to happen, but right stuff never happens out of wrong things. Correct? Correct? It takes doing right things. And here's the question. So here's the question. If you know the right things that you have to do in order to become all that God wants you to become, to honor God with your one and only life, when do you have to do the right things? Now. And you have to do them over and over and over and over for long periods of time, despite how you feel. Amen? And so how easy is that? Is that a piece of cake to do right things over and over, despite feeling like you don't want to do right things? No, it is hard, right? And here's what I'm learning, that in order to find success, it requires, in any area of life, it requires something from you. It requires something in you. It requires something of you. It requires, and it is a nasty, dirty word that almost none of us like, and here it is: success requires discipline. Oh, you already lost me, Pastor Jay, because I hate discipline. Right? But it's a nasty word. And we think of discipline as punishment. We think of discipline as enforcement of rules. We think of discipline as rigid and boring and having to do what somebody says, and that somebody's coming down on us. We think of discipline, just do it or else. But the word discipline, we need to unpack this a little bit, because it's not what you think. Discipline, it comes from the Latin word disciplina. I think it's how you would say it, disciplina. And it means to learn, right? To receive instruction or training, and that kind of is obvious, right? Anybody? You all with me so far? But what's interesting is the word disciplina or discipline, it comes from a different Latin word. Its root is in a different Latin word, and that root word is discere. Now, what word do we get out of discere? Come on. What word? Discern. To discern. You have to discern what is good for your life. You have to learn what is good for your life. You have to discern what will take you to where you want to go and to who you want to become. And I'm thinking this is a good thing. So discipline is not rules. It is not regulations. It is not punishment. It is not compliance. It is not enforcement. It is not rigid or boring or any of that stuff. Listen, I love this way this guy named Tim Knight says it. He is a performance consultant or something like that. He probably makes a lot of money. And he says it like this. He says, discipline is not something that you do, that others do to you. It is something you do for yourself. Come on, did you hear this? Discipline is not something that others do to you. It is something that you choose and do for yourself. So you can learn to, listen to this, you can learn to grow from a million different sources. And you can be trained and instructed from a million different sources. But listen to me. The source of discipline is not out there at all. If you're thinking of it as something that somebody else does to you, then you're wrong. The source of discipline is where? In here. It is not external. It is internal. Every single time. So discipline is not something that you choose to do to live up to somebody else's standards to avoid some sort of punishment. No, not at all. Listen, discipline is choosing to do the right things, come on, over and over and over for long periods of time, despite how you feel, because it is good for you. Come on. Because it will take you to where you want to go. It'll help you become who you want to become. It'll help you to mind your business well, to manage, listen, all that God has called you to. It is the source, listen, to becoming who God wants you to really become and to who you want to become. And so Jesus, people in the room, if we want to honor God with our one and only life, if we want to hear our Heavenly Father say, well done, good and faithful servant, enter into joy today, it requires something of you. It requires something of me. It requires this word named discipline. So somebody in the house needs to say amen or something, amen. Right? So let's look at the Holy Scripture for just a moment. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 and 8. It says this, pay close attention. It says, train yourself to be really super duper fit. Train yourself to be super duper smart. It says train yourself to be really, really, really wealthy. No, it has a higher goal than all of that, and all those are fine goals. But it says train yourself to be godly. For physical training is of some value, but godliness has a value for all the things, holding a promise for both the present life and the life to come. You have to do this training on purpose. You have to discipline yourself. You have to think about right things and choose to do right things over and over and over. Here's why, friends, because it will produce something good in you and from you. It'll produce something that you want to produce in your life. Let me ask real quick. Anybody in the room want to do great things? That was like perhaps the lousiest. Yeah, I want to do something good with my life, but I'm going to be okay just watching Netflix. Does anybody in the house actually want to achieve anything great in their life? Anything at all? Yeah. Then it requires for you to train yourself, to be disciplined toward this thing called godliness. And let me tell you something, friends. Godliness is your character. Godliness is your integrity. Godliness is your stewardship of your one and only life. It's how you carry yourself. It is how you present yourself before God to the world around you. It is how you treat. Listen, godliness is how you treat the potential that God has placed in you. It is how you care for the image that God has placed upon you with your life. It is how you answer the call that God has called you to. Success, listen, requires discipline. You can't start something on Monday and quit by Thursday because you didn't get the results on Wednesday because Tuesday was too hard. Pastor Jay, did you make that up? Yes, I did. Listen, let me say it again. You can't start something on Monday and quit by Thursday because you didn't get the results on Wednesday because it was too hard on Tuesday. So I just threw my hands up and said, forget it. No, it takes doing right things, come on, over and over and over for long periods of time, despite how you feel. I want to do something that I've learned that no good communicator, preacher, speaker ever does, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to read kind of a long section of a book to you. They say don't ever do this unless it's your book, but I don't have a book. But this book really inspired me. And so I'm going to read it to you. It's called Disciplines of a Godly Young Man. And so I'm not young, but this applies to me. And women in the house, you can listen as well. Is that cool? I'm going to read it to you because it's so good. It's just so good. Discipline is the difference in the sports world. Tiger Woods, prior to his moral failures, was by all estimates the greatest golfer over the last decade or two. And those who have watched clips of him juggling a ball on the head of a driver and then driving that same ball from midair straight down the fairway over 200 yards were in awed agreement. But this playful stunt was only the tip of a massive iceberg of lifelong discipline that he began at the age of 3. A discipline of a man so focused that he once refused to leave a practice hole until a dozen of his drives rested on a single small towel at the distant green hundreds and hundreds of yards away. The legendary Jack Nicklaus once said this. He's one of the greatest golfers of all time, apparently. He said, "The more I practice, the luckier I get." So good. Michael Phelps, 8 gold medals in the 2009 Olympics in Beijing were the result of thousands of hours and miles and miles and miles in the pool of discipline, in the pool of boredom. He once said it like this. He says, "You don't get the results that I get because you don't put the efforts that I put in." You don't get the results that I get because you don't do what I do to get those results. Kobe Bryant, famous for his three-point shots when he was alive. He would win basketball games at the buzzer, at the apex. But at the apex of all that, he writes, was the inglorious discipline of shooting thousands of shots unseen by anybody. Matthew Sade, who was an international bestseller, once wrote a book called Bounce. Here's the title, Bounce, Mozart, Federer, Picasso, and Beckham, and the science of success. So he writes about all these great people who are great in their fields. And he writes about Beckham, who is an international soccer star from Great Britain. He's famous for what they call the Beckham. People would say, bend it like Beckham, because he could take a soccer ball and he'd kick it in such a way that it would curve like literally up and around the goalie. Like he had this ability to put a trajectory on the soccer ball almost like nobody else would. And he said this, he said, my secret is practice. I've always believed that if you want to achieve anything special in life, you have to work, and then work some more. He said, as a kid, I would go to the local park in South London and I would kick the ball thousands of times from the exact same spot, trying to get it to the exact same spot every single time. Friends, that's the art of discipline, isn't it? Wayne Gretzky, perhaps one of the greatest soccer players of all time, said that hockey, I'm sorry, I'm so excited about this. Listen, he said, I was never great in the terms of size or speed. I was quite average with all of that. But he said, I studied the science of trajectory. I studied the math. He says, I knew where the puck was going to go before they knew where the puck was going to go because of the math involved. I learned the math. I hate math. And that's why I didn't get the same results, right? And then he talks about some other people. I'm going to skip that for time, but listen to this. He says, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and multitudes of others are famous for their sculptures and their artwork and their ability to draw and paint and all those sorts of things. But he says, listen, what prepared the way for an astonishing quality of their work was called discipline. We wonder how Da Vinci was able to paint a human hand unlike nobody else in business. But Da Vinci would say, I would paint thousands of hands unseen before I ever put one hand on display. Michelangelo himself once said this. He said, if people knew how hard I had to work to gain my mastery, it would not seem so wonderful. In other words, he said, if you knew just how wonderful it is, you wouldn't call me a natural, because it's not natural at all, right? Winston Churchill, regarded as perhaps the greatest orator, the greatest communicator in the 20th century. And if you've ever heard a speech from Winston Churchill, you would know just how incredible he was with the English language. He could motivate a dead person to walk. I mean, really, he was incredible. Anybody know who Winston Churchill is? If you don't, you should. You should go back and study who this man was. He was a great communicator, and people would say, you're a natural. You're a natural. They could see him come out and talk to millions of people and literally call him a natural, but he was far from natural. He had a lisp that was a impediment to his life, and he was very self-conscious of it. And so he would say, I would give a speech, but people would not know that I've given that speech 100 times before, because I would do it in my closet. I would do it in my bedroom with nobody looking. I would practice every word, every pause, every stutter was on purpose. Every inflection was on purpose. Because why? Success requires what? It requires discipline. It requires you to do what others are not willing to do. If you want anything great in your life, listen, it is going to require absolute discipline. And friends, listen to me. This is doubly true of your soul. It is doubly true of a spiritual life. Because listen, you can look at an athlete or you can look at a musician and go, oh, they're just a natural. And it's true that there are some people who are just born with the right body. Am I right? They're just like, they're made for this, right? Or maybe they hear music when they're young and they're just able to play it and it just comes easy to them. Can we all agree that there are some naturals in different areas of life? Yes. I think it's true, right? But here's something that's true also, is that there are no natural spiritual giants. None. Nobody is born a spiritual giant. Nobody. As a matter of fact, it's quite the opposite. Every single one of us is born with this theological term called depravity. Every one of us is bent toward sin. Every one of our hearts is bent away from God, not toward God. This is why you do not have to teach a 2-year-old how to lie. It comes natural. You do not need to teach a 2-year-old how to be disobedient. It comes natural to them, and it comes natural to you, and it comes natural to me. And so if we're going to grow in our soul, we have to do it on purpose. Because listen, here's what the book of Romans says, chapter 3, verses 10 through 12. It says, there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned away and together have become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one. So listen carefully, friends, to this. Because of this bent in our life, because of who we are naturally, and because we are children of God's grace, amen? Because of the grace given to us by our Heavenly Father, there is something required for us to build godly character in our life. It is discipline. It is training. It is deciding that what Jesus says matters most in our life and living that way. Friends, listen, for Jesus people in the room, who do we learn from? This isn't a trick question. Jesus people, who do we learn from? Jesus. Okay, let's try one more time. Okay. Jesus people. Who do we learn from? Jesus. Who do we want to become like? Who do we want more of in our life? Jesus, right? And so Jesus, what did he call you to? Did he call you to be a good person? Nope, he did not. What he called you to was to be a disciple. To be a disciple. Now, let me put up 2 words on the screen for you and see if you can notice anything. One has its root in the other. Can you see it? It's kind of clear as day, right? If you want to grow your soul, if you want to become more like Christ in your life and you want to have him lead you and you want to live a life one day where he looks at you and says, well done. It is going to require something of you and from you. It's going to require a spiritual discipline in your life. And let me tell you something, friends. Listen. You tracking with me so far? You tracking with me? Because this is nasty talk. Nobody likes this kind of talk. Nobody does. I don't. Nobody does. But listen, when we lose our personal, if you don't hear anything else, hear this. Listen, when we lose our personal discipline, we lose our choice. We lose our choice. We give control to other people, to other things. We give our choice to our impulses, to external circumstances. We give our choices, listen, to the inevitable randomness of life, if nothing else. You see, when discipline drifts from our life drifts. When discipline drifts from relationships, guess what happens? Relationship drifts. When it drifts from your finances drift. When it drifts from your health drifts. And when it drifts from your soul drifts. And we say it all the time, there's not a lot in this world that wants to help your soul grow into all that God wants you to become. You have to train for it. You have to do it on purpose. Amen? Amen. So say this with me again. Success equals doing the right things over long periods of time despite how you feel. So here's what I want to do. I want to take us into the Bible deeply this morning, and I want us to see how this fleshes out right from the words of Scripture. And I'm going to take a risk. I've taken 2 risks this morning. I read, and now I'm going to do another thing. I'm going to use a childhood story that almost every single person is probably aware of. And there's a risk in this because when you use a story that is so simple that you think you know what it's about, you think you've heard it, and you kind of will shut it out and dismiss it. But I'm begging you, don't do this, because we're going to study together the story of David and Goliath. And we are going to do an old-fashioned Bible study. Is that okay? We're going to do old-fashioned, old school. So I need you to help me out a little bit. If you can turn to 1 Samuel chapter 17. So if you were to just type in 1 Samuel 17, it'll magically appear on your Google search at the top of the bar, I think. 1 Samuel 17. And when you got it, say ready. Say ready. Anybody ready? Okay, give you a second more. 1 Samuel 17. When you're ready, say ready. All right, good enough. We got most of you. Okay, here we go. You guys ready? Okay, so here we go. Verse 1. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for, what is this word? War. And assembled at Socoh in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes-Dammim. These are cities, areas, regions, between Socoh and Azekah. Verse 2. Saul the Israelites assembled and camped at the valley of Elah, and they drew up their battle lines to meet the Philistines. The Philistines, here it is, listen, occupied one hill, and the Israelites another, with a valley between them. Okay, now I want to help you out a little bit. I'm going to actually put up the actual valley where this battle occurred in Israel some 3,000 years ago. This is it. This is the exact picture of the valley. Now, I want you to notice a couple things here real quick. You see the fertile ground in the middle, like almost looks like farm fields in the middle now? Yes? Okay, so that is the valley it's referring to. Remember it said that the Philistines were camped on one side of the valley and the Israelites on the other side of the valley. Now, if you look at the foreground here, the Israelite camp was on this kind of hillside region. And so the army spread across this hilly, kind of what you call mountain foothills, rocky foothills right here. And then on the far side, you have the other side of these rocky kind of foothill, mountainy kind of things. And that's where the Philistines were camped. And the battlefield is the middle. Does that make sense? Now, I want to go a little closer into this in order for you to really understand what was happening. Put the second picture up real quick. Now, this is a close-up from the field in the middle to the Israel side of the coin. And what do you notice in the foreground where these people are standing? Now, it looks like a pathway to you in this picture, but it's actually a stream that at certain times of the year, it's a creek, it's a riverbed. It's a dried up riverbed in this exact picture, but that's a stream. Now, I want you to notice that you go from this nice flat field to this mountainside, right? Now, I want you to think about something. If you know your history at all, you might remember that the Philistines had something very unique about them. They were the dominant empire in the Middle East around 3000 about 1000 BC, 3000 years ago. Now listen, they were the first to develop bronze and metal weaponry. They were the first to develop blacksmithing at a high level. And listen, like the Egyptians, they mastered the use of chariots. They mastered the use of chariots. This is why they were the dominant empire in their day. Now, I want you to go a little to the third picture, if you could, please. Now, I just want to make sure we understand what's going on here. So we got the Israelites, you got the stream, and you got this battle area. So let me ask you a question. Why do you think King Saul picked this area exactly to camp? Come on, it's pretty obvious, right? because he had to do everything he could to make sure that he would not do battle with chariots because he knew he would get his butt kicked and that his men were no match for this dominant empire. So he's up on the hillside, the battleground's down below, but he purposely chooses the other side of the creek. Why? Because there ain't no chariot going up there, right? And furthermore, the average Philistine soldier would be well-armed, full of metal, and he knew that it would be much easier for my unmetalled, unarmored, scrappy soldiers to beat these beasts if the beasts had to carry up all that stuff up the hill. Does that make sense? You're all tracking with this so far, right? Now, does that not change what's going on in your mind a little bit? There's a reason why they're camped the way they're camped. There's a reason the scripture clearly denotes why this is important. So, on one side, you have the Israelites, you have the valley, and then on the other side, the Philistines. And they're supposed to come down into the valley to do battle. But the Israelites are going, we ain't going down there. Right? We're not going down there. It's not going to happen. You're going to see this in the story. Now, I want you to pause just for a second. Ever feel like there's a slide coming in your life? That you're being taunted to be pulled down? Anybody? You ever feel like you're doing battle against a giant? I just want to tell you, one of the things that we're going to learn is that eventually you have to face the giants of life. They're not going to go away on their own. You're going to have to do battle with them if you're ever going to succeed. Okay, now listen, verse 4. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, he came from the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span, which puts him around 9 foot tall. So imagine being this guy's parents trying to keep up with school clothes. Okay, ain't gonna happen, right? But there are these anomalies in history, and even today, there are these super tall people, and this guy was one of them. And he had a bronze helmet on his head, and he wore a scale of armor of bronze, weighing 5,000 shekels, which is about 120 pounds, roughly, if we put it into modern English. And so this guy was sort of massive, like me, you know what I mean? And on his legs, he wore a bronze greave. He wore this armor. He had a bronze javelin, which was slung across his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and his iron point weighed 600 shekels, which would be about 15 pounds. So his weaponry was heavy. Now you know why Saul wanted them to run up a hill and fight on rocky terrain, not on some smooth terrain. Do you see now? You see now what's happening exactly? Come on, you with me? So it says Goliath, verse 8, he stood and he shouted to the ranks of Israel. Where's he standing? He's standing in the flat land. He's enticing them to come down. He's the giant calling you downward, right? And he says, he stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, why do you come out and line up? Why do you come out and line up for battle, but not actually do battle, right? Am I not a Philistine and you are not the servant of Saul? Choose a man and have him come, what is the word? Down to me. So he's out here, he's looking up at the hillside, all the armies up there. Why don't you guys come out and fight like a man? Right? And they're going, yeah, because you're a really big man. That's why, right? That's exactly why. And so it says, if he is able to fight me, he makes this offer. If he is able to fight me and kill me, we will be your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill you, you'll become our subject. No one else has to die. No one else has to die. So he's making this kind of one-on-one kind of an offer, right? Then it says, verse 10, then the Philistine said, this day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. And to that we say, no kidding. Right? No kidding. And you know this, what's happening in this story. This is really a playground bully and egging a fight on, isn't it? That's exactly what's happening. And this was common back in this day. You know this throughout history. One side would line up, the other side would line up. But what we don't realize is sometimes this taunting would go on for months. They're trying to do psychological, warfare toward each other. And that's exactly what was going on. Have you ever, by the way, little side note, have you ever been the product of psychological warfare where you have a giant in your life telling you you are not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you're never going to make it, you are never going to be enough, why even try? Anybody know what I'm talking about? It's a battle within your own soul. You don't need anybody on the outside telling you that. There's a giant inside of you telling you this already. But one thing that we know, one thing that David's he knows is that success equals what? Anybody know? Have you heard this? Success equals doing right things over long periods of time, despite how you, feel, right? Verse 12, it says, now David was the son of an Ephraimite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time, he was very old. So it's saying Jesse at this time was very, very old. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul into war. The firstborn was Eliab. The second was Abinadab, and third was Shammah. Verse 14, David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David, listen, went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. So what's going on here? There was no Instagram or text or anything like that, no DMing. And so what do you do? He sends his son daily or often to go check on the battle, because the battle is still in the taunting stage. Anybody, right? And they're still kind of going back and forth. And so Jesse's at home. He wants news of his sons, so he would take his youngest son and say, go, get me some news, and come back. Y'all with me so far? Verse 16. For 40 days, the Philistine, does happen for 40 days in a row. Come on. For 40 days, the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. And so you can just see he's on the flat field. He's looking up saying, why don't you guys come down here and fight? But King Saul knew that this was the only equalizer for him. This was the only equalizer if they would come up to fight. But the giant is calling you down to fight. Now look at this. I want to show you another picture. It's this before this next section. It's a great picture. This is the close-up of the creek that up to your left would have been the camps for the Israelites, and then if you were to go this way, there's the field. But what do you notice in this creek bottom, in this stream? It's rocks. No, a chariot's going to have a hard time in that. A horse is going to have a hard time in that, right? But what also do you see in there? You see these little rocks. Now remember that. As we go forward. Verse 17, now Jesse said to his son David, take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers, and hurry to the camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of the unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. In other words, tell me that we're doing good. But they were not doing good. They were, anybody remember? Terrified. They were terrified. Then it says this, verse 19, they are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. There wasn't much fighting going on at this point, and so David's bringing them cheese and crackers. Right? That's exactly what's going on. Verse 20, it says this, early in the morning, David left the flock in the cave with the shepherd, loaded up and set out as Jesse, his father, had directed him. He reached the camp as the army was going out to their battle positions. Now, think about where they're going. They're not going out to the middle of the field. That's where Goliath is. They're coming down off the mountain to the edge of the mountain, but not into the field. Does that make sense? Right? So they're probably on the other side of the stream, up the hill just a little bit at this point, right? Then it says this. David left his things with the keeper of the supplies, ran to the battle line. So he runs down the little hillside and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking to his brothers, Goliath, this Philistine champion from the city of Gath, he steps out from his lines, comes down, comes across the field, shouts his usual defiance. And David hears this usual defiance. Whenever the Israelites saw this man, they all fled from him in great fear. So think about what's going on. Overnight, they're like, tomorrow's it, man. We're not taking this crap anymore. We're going down. We're going to get this fight on. And now they're coming down the edge of the mountain, right? They're like getting real close. And Goliath is out there. And then all of a sudden, when Goliath starts talking, they see him up close. They're like, nope. And what did they fled. They went back where? Up the mountainside, right? Because that's where it is safe, right? Now, David happens to come just at the right time. He sees this big dude shouting all these threats. He sees all the people are in fear. But David's learned something. Maybe you've heard this before, that success equals doing right things over long periods of time despite how you feel, right? And then it says this, verse 25. Now the Israelites had been saying, do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king, and then he says, but our king, he's offered something. The king of Israel has offered something to all the warriors, okay? He says the king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. But not only great wealth, he's going to one-up it. And listen to this. He's going to also give his daughter in marriage. And here is the icing on the cake. Glory to God. He will exempt his entire family from taxes in Israel. And I'm thinking, keep the girl. Just give me the tax-free abatement. I could go with that, right? Woo! Okay. So, verse 26. David asked the men standing near him, what did the king say? What did the king say will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God, right? And you can see what's coming. David's starting to think in his mind, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And he understands what it's like to fight giants, right? Because David understands something about success. He understands that when you get a picture of who God is, he understands that those giants don't seem so big anymore. Church, nobody heard that nobody heard that at all? Because when you get a picture of how big and how good, when is God good? All the time. When you get a picture of how good God is to you all the time, you will not think that giant you've been fighting for 25 years is so big anymore. You will not think that giant that you're facing right now is so big anymore, because listen, when you get a picture of a big God, it makes giants look small. When you get a picture of a big God, you with me? It makes giants look small. And so verse 27, they repeated to him what the king had said and told him, this is what will be done for the man who kills this giant, right? And David's like, you sissies. He's like, you sissies. You have the opportunity to do right things and get paid for it. And he's thinking this is a good deal, right? He's thinking, woo, I get to do the right thing by honoring God with my life, and I can walk away a rich man with a woman. Woo, wow, right? So he's like all into this, right? Verse 28, it says, when Eliab, his brother, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, have you ever been angry at your younger brother? Why don't you just shut up? Why don't you just be quiet? You're embarrassing me, right? That's exactly what's going on here. And then he says, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? In other words, David, you're just a shepherd. That's all you are. You're not a warrior. You shouldn't even be here. What are you getting all hot under the collar for about this? This isn't your game. This is my game, right? And then he says this, and with whom did you leave those sheep? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You come down here only to watch the battle. And David's going, you ain't seen nothing, right? Because isn't this how life works? Somebody's always trying to knock you down to size. Or is it just me? Haven't you noticed this is exactly how life is? Somebody's always telling you you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you don't have the right education, the right family, you don't have the right opportunity, that you are a victim. And David's like, no. There's a formula that I heard one time. It's called success equals doing right things over long periods of time despite what anybody else says. Despite it. Verse 29, you ready for this? You ready for this? David says, now what have I done? And David said, can't I even speak? And then he turned away to someone and brought up the same matter with them. And then the men answer. So he kind of turns away from his brother and like, I'm going to go talk to somebody else about this because I don't like what you're saying right now. And then the answer was the same as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. So in other words, think about what's going on. So David's like going, all you got to do is go out and kill this guy, and you're going to be rich and get a girl? What? This is a good deal. And so the king, it's reported to the king that somebody's talking like, hey, I'll do this. And so they go to the king, and the king orders that David, or this man, he doesn't know it's David yet, but he orders that this guy be brought to him. You see this in your mind? Y'all good so far? You with me? And then David said to Saul, so they bring him in, and it says, David said to Saul, verse 32, let no one lose heart. In other words, oh, king, don't worry your pretty little face. I'll take care of this for you, right? He's like, don't lose heart. On account of this Philistine, your servant will go and fight him. Success is doing the right thing over long periods of time, despite how you feel. And then Saul replies to this little thing. He says, you are not able to go out and fight this Philistine. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. You've been told all your life that you can't. You've heard it from outside, and you've heard it from within. You and I, we've been defeated a number of times in our life, and because of that, we think we can't. And this king is telling David what he's already been told by his brothers and by everybody else. You can't, and you won't. But David said to Saul, he says to the king, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. And everybody's like, everybody in Israel's a sheep guy. Everybody does sheep, right? He says it doesn't make you special, but he says something else. He says, when a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from my flock, I went after it and I struck it and I rescued the sheep from the lion's mouth. And when it turned on me, I seized it by its hair and I struck it and I killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. I love that. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine, he kind of throws that jab in there, and says, will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. Woo! Come on. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine, right? And so David seemed to understand that doing right things over and over, despite how you feel, that was the formula. And he says, I've been doing the right things for a long time. I've been working when I was a kid to do the right thing. And when I was a teenager, I was working to do the right thing. And when fear came over me, I did the right thing anyways. I moved forward and went after the very thing that took from me and my family. And I defended myself and my family. He knew how big God was, amen? And he also knew something else. That if he was going to live up to the faithfulness of God and to the gifts of God and to the calling of God and to the potential of God in his life, he knew that he had to step out and risk something. And it was when he stepped out to risk something that he would meet God. Because God meets you in the risk. When you're doing it for his glory, for his renown, for his fame. To bring honor to him. When you're making the right move in your life, God will meet you. So Saul says to David, go and the Lord will be with you. In other words, go and good luck. Right? Verse 38. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put on the coat of armor on him, the king's coat of armor, and the bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried to walk around. But because he was not used to them, he says, now pause real quick. We grew up reading these little Bible stories, right? And you see the pictures in the Bible stories where the Goliath guy is so huge and David's like this little 9, 10-year-old boy, right? You see this. That's not true. That is not true. David was not a kid in this. It said that he was already a young man. We read that earlier. So most of us would understand that probably between 16 and 20 years old, somewhere in that range, right? It says his father was very old at this time, and he had 7 older brothers. We're talking his dad's old. He's not a child anymore, right? And we see these pictures, and it leads us to think that he's just a kid, but he's not, because listen, he tried on the king's armor. He's like, I think I can wear your size. Listen, my kids, I mean, he ain't as tough as me, but he's as big as me. You know what I'm saying? You get this when you're older, like me. All right. But David says, no, I can't go in this. Listen, he says, because I'm not used to them. So he took them off, and then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones. Where is he standing? On the edge of the river. Goliath is right out there. He's up. The rest of the army is behind him. He's like in the stream at this point, right? He's there. And then it says he put them in his pouch of his shepherd's bag, and he had a sling in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. He wasn't waiting around. He made a decision to do the right thing. And when do you do the right thing? Right now. When do you do the right thing? On Monday, I'll start my diet. I'm going to go back to school in the next few years. I'm going to start thinking about career pathways when I'm 30. I'm going to think about getting serious about really building a family. One day, I'm going to clean out my closet, right? When do you do the right thing? Come on, church. Yeah, right now, because success is doing the right things over and over. Now, listen, think about this real quick. It says he grabbed 5 stones. 5 stones. So I was thinking, why 5 stones? And I did some research on this. There's theologians out there who say, well, more than likely, Goliath had brothers. And when you go to fight one brother, you fight all the brothers, right? And that makes sense a little bit, right? Some people reckon that David understood that when he made this first move, then it was game on. It was going to be all out battle. Everybody's in on the game at that point. So he needed more than 1 stone, right? I think it maybe might be something simpler than that. I think it was because David knew that he might miss on the first shot. That simple. And if you want success, you have to do right things over and over despite missing on the first shot. You need to throw another stone. Well, I tried dieting once. You throw another stone. I tried getting in health shape once. Throw another stone. I tried to fix my finances once and it didn't. Throw another stone. I've tried to become something more, but it just didn't work out, so I settled down here. Throw another stone, right? Because doing right things, it requires you to do them over and over and over. Come on, and over and over and over and over. Despite feeling like you're ready to quit. And then it says this. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer and closer to David, right? He looked David over and he saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. Now, I get this because a lot of people, they look at me and they go, man, that guy's good looking and I just hate him because of it. I get it, okay? But Goliath, man, there was this jealousy of David. He saw that he was young and vibrant and full of life and enthusiasm, and on top of it all, he was good looking, right? And he despised him. And he said to David, am I a dog that you come out at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here and I will give your flesh to the birds and to the wild animals. And you got to love this because David's going to do his own trash talking. He turns it around because he realizes, wow, it is Goliath at 9 foot, but it's me and God. So I got this guy beat. Right? He realizes something different because he's going with God. Therefore I won't fear anymore. What was that old song we did? If God is for us, who can stand against? Right? David realizes that there's something special going on here because it's right things over long periods of time, despite a big, fat, ugly guy, giant of a guy staring you down. He understands that you do that despite that. You'll find success. It says the day of the Lord, David does his own trash talking. It's so good. He says, David says to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord God Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down, and I will cut off your head. Not only am I going to knock you off your feet, I'm going to cut your head off. Now, how do you think Goliath is taking this? Oh, no, this is business now right here. And then he goes, this very day, I will give the carcasses, not just your carcasses, but the carcasses of the entire Philistine army to the birds of the air and the wild animals. And the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All of those who gather here today will know that it is not by sword or spear, but it is the Lord God Almighty who saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. Come on. And so now it says that this Philistine, he moves closer to attack him. Now listen, he's out in the field, David's in the stream, and that's the dividing line, because up the hill is the armies of Israel, and that's their territory. The flatlands on the territory here. But Goliath, when you become defiant to the giant in your life, it's going to move into attack. It's going to move into attack, and it begins to move in. But David, what it says is about David, it says that David, when he sees the Goliath, this giant of a man coming at him, he turns around, drops his stuff, and runs back up the hill. It says that David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him face to face. David didn't start his diet on Monday. He says it's on. David didn't say, I'm going to live up to my call when I get in my 40s and life slows down a little bit. He says it's game on right now, because this giant ain't going down without a fight. And I'm ready for the fight because God is with me. Because God is with me. It says he ran quickly in the battle. He knew that when do right things need to be done? Right now. Right now. So reaching into his bag, he takes out a stone, he slings it, and he strikes the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank into the guy's forehead, and he falls face down. He's like, what in the hot hay just hit me? Boom, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And so David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and he killed him. Now David ran and he stands over the Philistine. So he's like, yeah! It's like, yeah, right? And the guy's down. And then it says this, he takes the very sword that Goliath threatened him with, sheathes it, right? And then it says, with that sword, he cut off the head of this Philistine. And when the rest of the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turn and ran. And you would too, right? Then the men of Israel and Judah, they surged forward with a shout, and they pursued the Philistines to the entrance of the city of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. The dead were strewn all along the roads to Gath and Ekron. And when the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they even took all their junk. They plundered their camp, right? Verse 57. As soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before the king, Saul, with David still holding the Philistine's head. Like, you think about it, he's like, I don't know what just happened, but I got this. And oh, king, you owe me something now, right? So maybe you could say this with me. Success equals doing right things over long periods of time, despite how you feel. You know, the story of David and Goliath is a prime example of this, but I don't know if you track through David's life, it wasn't always this way. David, after killing the Goliath, he almost lost everything. He could take down a Goliath in his life, but a naked woman took him down. He let his heart drift from God. Friends, listen. If you're going to fulfill, and if I'm going to fulfill the God-given potential in our life, it's doing the right thing over your lifetime. Well, I'm too old to start that junk now. No, you are not. You are never too old to start living up to your God-given potential. Amen. And you are never too young. We got 100 kids at a camp right now. They are never too young to start living out their God-given potential. And you got to do that over a lifetime, despite feeling like it's not worth it sometimes, despite feeling like the world is against you sometimes, despite feeling like you want to give up because you've tried 100 times. Well, try another time. Throw another stone. Don't give up and don't give in. I ask you to think about the right things in your life. I don't expect you to do them, but God does. But God does. Let's stand to our feet. Let's stand to our feet and honor God today. Come on. We pray our way out of here. Oh, we got to hurry because I'm not afraid of a Goliath, but I am afraid of the kids' workers. We got to get out of here. Okay. Dear Jesus, we come before you, and I just pray for my brothers and sisters. I know that we all face giants. I know that there are Goliaths in our life. And I pray, God, that your Spirit would empower and fill every man and woman in this place. God, that you would stir something deep in their soul. And that they would realize that they can run into battle because you are in the battle. So God, speak to us. Stir something new inside of us. Help us not to shrink back. Help us to become who you want us to become. And God's people would say, amen.